Hey everyone! Today in the workshop, I'm going to be showing you the paint schemes that I'm using to paint the Starline 2400 range of Kzinti ships for Starfleet battles. Let's get started. So as you can see, I've already done up the Kzinti command cruiser, and I'm going to be showing you the process on the Kzinti strike cruiser. So the first thing is we're going to prime the model with Citadel Mephiston red spray paint. Make sure you get a really good coat on there. The next thing we're going to do is give an overall wash of 50% Citadel Carrosburg Crimson and 50% Citadel Nuln oil. So let's get that taken care of. We want to make sure that we cover the entire model, but I don't want to have too many areas that are really heavily pooled where you're getting these dark spots. So I'm going to get this wash over the whole model and then go back and sort of put my brush into the heavy spots and draw out a little bit of it. All right, so that looks pretty good. I'm going to clean off my brush and then just go back and hit some of these really deep areas and take out just a little bit of the shade so it's not so very dark. And I'm just dabbing my brush on a paper towel every now and then just to get the excess off. That looks pretty good. We're going to let that dry and we'll move on to the next step. So our overall wash is nice and dry now, and you can see it's done what it's supposed to. It's putting these little dark areas in, and now we are going to contrast that with several dry brush applications with I think I'm using 3 or 4 different Citadel reds. So the idea being it's going to be really subtle and build it up over layers. So the very first color we're going to apply is Citadel Khorne red, and I'm using my small round dry brush for this. And so what we're going to do is we're going to load the brush up. We're going to get most of it off, and then what we're going to do is we're going to start working in small circular motions, and we're going to concentrate on the lines, on these raised lines and the edges. The idea being is that we're going to highlight and brighten the edges where 2 panels meet and keep the interior of those panels a little bit darker. So I'm going to go ahead and do the whole model with the Khorne red, and then we will move on to the next color. Okay, so that is looking pretty good for a start. So our next color for dry brushing is going to be Citadel Mephiston red. So I'm kind of just working my way up from dark to light. Also, I'm not going to worry about cleaning off my brush from the Khorne red before, because I think for the initial few passes, it's going to blend the 2 colors together, which is kind of nice. So again, we are just working on the lines where the 2 plates meet with small circular motions, and we're just going to lighten these up. And we don't want to get too far in so that we lose the darkness of the wash. So just be mindful and work right on the edges. So that's starting to come together. It's looking really nice. Our next color that we're going to be using is Citadel's Evil Sun Scarlet, which is a much brighter red. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to be working in small circular motions, but I'm going to be extra careful to just try and cover a smaller section of the areas that I'm dry brushing, because I don't want this particular color to go too far. It's going to be really just for hitting the very tops, because as you can see, it's a very bright color. And again, I'm not worrying about cleaning off my dry brush from the last colors because I want it to sort of blend on the brush as well. So here we go. All right, that looks really good. I'm very pleased with how that's coming out. So for the last part of the dry brushing, I'm going to take my flat brush. I'm using the same Evil Sunz Scarlet, but I'm going to do kind of a combination of a pin and edge highlighting and dry brushing just right along these creases, because I want them to have just a little bit extra pop. So let's see how this looks. All right, so all of the overall washes and dry brushing, highlighting is done. This looks really good. It's not as dynamic on video as it is in real life, but it looks really, really nice. So now we are going to move on to doing the details for the Kzinti ships. My opinion about the Kzinti ships is in much the same way that the decals really make the Federation ships look top notch. I really think that the windows on the Kzinti ships really bring everything out, because there's so many of them and they're really nice looking. I've seen references that say the windows are white. I've seen references that say the windows are yellow. I've tried both, and I kind of like the way the yellow looks, the warmth of the yellow up against the red. So this is the command cruiser I've done, and then here's the light cruiser. And I really, really think that applying the windows is the part that really makes a Kzinti ship look like a Kzinti ship. So for the windows, I am using AK Deep Yellow. It is pretty sure at this point, this is my favorite yellow. It's got great coverage. The trick for me to doing the Kzinti windows is mixing the paint so it is the right consistency. You want it to flow really nicely. I'm using a nice thin long, like a liner brush. You want the paint to flow really nicely, but you don't want it so thin that you've got to do 2 coats, because who wants to do 2 coats when you're trying to do precision line work. Anyway, I've mixed up some of my yellow, and we're going to start adding some of the windows. So I'm just getting a little bit of paint on the brush, and then what I want to do is just very steadily apply the paint and then draw it over, just like that. That was probably too far away. Here, let me do another one. So we're going to put the brush down. And just draw a nice little straight line. And we're going to do that a couple of dozen times because they got a lot of windows. So, and you know, I try to be as precise as I can with these, but sometimes I get little rounded edges or I get little mistakes or glops. And there's no reason why you can't take like a medium red and thin it down and then go over them and fix some of the edges. And I'll, you know, if I need to, after doing all the windows, I will show how that's done. But I'm going to go ahead and just get the rest of the windows done for this strike cruiser. Now, another thing I was going to mention is I've seen a lot of references for how the windows are laid out and how many there are and where they are and all that. I'm kind of just taking a couple of the ones that I like and replicating those patterns. So we'll just see what they look like. All right, that's not too bad. I'm happy with those, how those came out initially, although I am going to go back and take some red and tighten up the windows a little bit so they look a little bit more crisp, like they look on the command cruiser. Okay, so I've trimmed up all of the windows. What I did is just took some Citadel Mephiston red, watered it down a little bit, and then just went around each of the windows and squared them up a bit. So I think they're a little bit smaller, a little bit more to scale, and I think they look a lot better now than they did before. So also, one other thing I wanted to mention, I was going to show the entire clip of me actually painting the windows in, but I'm still getting used to my uh, overhead setup with my camera, and my head got in the way of the shot. So that's how come I cut it close. I'm still learning with my new setup. Anyway, the windows are done, and we're going to start moving on to the lettering, the ship insignia, and the details on the warp engines, the phasers, and all of that. So we'll be right back. All right, so I think next in line is going to be doing the ship name lettering. So I found this sheet of Kzinti symbols and alphabet online. I honestly, I don't remember where I found it. I also have the cruiser symbols that I'm going to be using. These are from the Amarillo Design Bureau website, if I'm not mistaken. But first thing we're going to do is put a name on the ship. And for that, we are going to be using Citadel Moot Green, watered down just a little bit to make it easier to paint with. And I'm just going to throw a couple of symbols on here. I'm going to take, I think we'll put some right here on the front of the bridge. There we go. And let's see. All right. That looks pretty good so far. I think I'll add another one. Now, again, as with the windows and a lot of the paint scheme for the Kzintis, I've seen a lot of different references as to where the names go on the different ships. I am kind of using an idea that I think makes sense. And I'm just going to go with it. Perfect. So that looks good. So we've got a vertical name on the top of the hull, and we've got a horizontal name on the front hull. That works well. So our next step is going to be, I think I'll go ahead and put the symbol on the top of the primary hull there. All right, so we're starting with the ship's symbol that goes on the top here. You can see this on the command cruiser. And I'm going to keep the same, so the dark gray is the fleet designation. So as I'm going to probably play with all these at the same time, I'll make the strike cruiser of the same fleet. So the they're calling it the lower, but you have to align the ships this way. I'm going to make the lower rectangle the same color on the strike cruiser, and for that I'm using Citadel Skavenblight Dinge. And then for the upper rectangle, on the command cruiser, it's gold because it's a command or leader. For the strike cruiser, it's going to be just a standard combat, so I'm going to make it white, and then we'll decide what specific insignia to put on the strike cruiser. So let's go ahead and paint in the lower rectangle. And I think I'm just going to use this raised square. I was going to make it bigger, but I kind of like having things look a bit to scale. So that looks pretty good. I may go in with the Mephiston red after I'm all done and just run a line around it to give me some crisp edges. And so for the top insignia, we're going to make that white. So I'm going to use Citadel White Scar. And we'll just throw that in. And again, I'm going to go ahead and clean up these lines with some Mephiston red, so I'm not terribly worried about the corners and the lines, but actually that looks pretty good. All right. So I think in keeping with the Moot green for the lettering, I think I'll make a nice green, like a little green triangle as the ship's symbol. I think that'll look pretty good. So let's see. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good. All right, I'm going to go ahead and clean up the edges with some Mephiston red, and we'll be right back for the next step. All right, so our next step is going to be painting in the phasers and the disruptible areas, the little triangles on the front here. That's where the disruptor banks are, and then we just have these spots along the hull for the phasers. So that should be pretty simple. And for that, I am using Citadel Administratum Gray. So we'll just get those painted in real quick. And like with all of the other areas, I'm not terribly worried about making these lines super crisp because I'm going to go back with the Mephiston red and clean them up. All right, that takes care of the disruptors. So now we're just going to dot in the phaser banks. And I'm not sure if these are phasers, but I'm going to give them a dot anyway to give the ship some more dynamic bits. There we go. And then a couple along the back here. And then we'll also do the phasers on the underside. Because why not? Those are the phaser banks. I'm going to clean those up and we'll move on to the next step. All right, so we're down to the small detail part. So our next step is to put in some engine glow. And you can see it here on the command cruiser, these little blue areas. And for that, we're going to be using Citadel Temple Guard blue. And this is just going to be a simple line down the side of the warp nacelle. Just like that. So now we'll just do the same thing on the other nacelles. I don't know if you can see the detail, but there's actually a little trench that runs along the side of the nacelle, and that makes things much easier when you go to paint because the paint will want to naturally stay in that little depression. All right, and two more on the underside. And the last one. Perfect. That gives the engines a little bit of a glow, which is kind of cool. So our next detail bit, we're going to stay with the engines. And we're going to do each of the vanes going around the top of each of the nacelles, and those are going to be, we're going back to the Citadel Skavenblight Dinge, and we're just going to lay in a line on the top and on the back of the nacelle, like so, and then a little bit on the bottom as well. And that looks pretty good. Sometimes you can do both sides with just one brush stroke, which is kind of nice. Awesome. That looks pretty good. So that part's done. And we're going to move on. I'm going to let those dry. I have a little bit more detail to do on the nacelles, but I'm going to let those two colors dry before I do that. We'll move on to doing the impulse engines in the back. Okay, so for the impulse engines, as you can see on the command cruiser and the light cruiser, I'm going back to my favorite yellow, aka deep yellow. And I'm just going to drop. You can see there's like a little depression right on either side. And all I'm going to do is just drop some yellow in there and let it spread out on its own. That's one side. There we go. I'm going to do a little bit more on this side to kind of even things out. There we go. Impulse engines are done. All right, so while the warp nacelles are finishing drying, I'm going to hit the deflector dishes. The back of the deflector dishes, we're using the Skavenblight Dinge again because it's a nice darkish gray. And we're just going to get the backs of these painted. And we got to make sure we get everything covered. Sometimes it's, when you're dealing with dark colors on dark colors, sometimes it's hard to see that you've got everything covered. So just take your time and double check. We're going to wrap around the sides here. And while I have the Skavenblight Dinge out, I'm also going to do the drone racks, which are on the ends of each of these pylons on either side of the ship. So I'm just going to hit that. And then also on the other side. And there we go. All right, so our next step is going to be to return to the warp nacelles and finish off the detailing there. Okay, so we have 2 more areas to do, and then this straight cruiser is done. Our first area is going to be doing this engine, this detail on the warp nacelles, and for that we're using Citadel Liberator Gold. it's not as, it's more of a brassy gold. I'm going to use a golder gold for the front of the deflector dishes. But for this one, I kind of wanted a different gold. So we're just going to throw in a little bit of detail on the warp nacelles. It's a little bit different for every ship. And I'm just putting this in to give the warp nacelles a little bit extra detail. All right, so we just have the areas on the bottom to do. And that looks pretty good, and that gives the warp nacelles just a little bit extra detail. All right, so our last step is going to be painting the front of the deflector dishes, and for that we are using Citadel Retributor armor, which is a warmer, it's a warmer gold. And so we're going to go ahead and just put some of that on the front of these deflector dishes. We're just going to plop a little bit right in front. We want to make sure to work to the edge of the gray to make sure everything's covered. And that looks pretty good. And that is our strike cruiser. I'm going to go ahead and paint the base. And for the base, I'm using Citadel Abaddon Black, which is one of my favorite black paints. I usually will just get the bottom here and then work our way to the top. And this covers pretty good. It's really interesting how when you get the whole model painted, it looks really good, but then once you add the black to the stand, the ship and all the various colors on it really stand out. All right, well, let's just work our way up. And that strike cruiser is done. All right, we're going to let that black dry, and then we'll give this guy a clear coat, top coat, and we'll be right back to see the finished product. And there is our finished Kzinti force of a command cruiser, a light cruiser, and a strike cruiser. Once again, thank you guys for visiting and watching my video. Please subscribe, and I will look forward to seeing you in our next video. We've got some great ones coming up. Thanks again. Take care. Bye-bye.